Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Megan and today I'm going to talk about mdDS and how to kind of overcome that rocking, swaying feeling. So the main thing I'm going to be talking about today is what mdDS actually is and what is happening in your brain when you have these kind of symptoms. And then I'll go into all sorts of ways and practices that you can use to begin to reduce these sensations. I really wanted to make this video because although I say in my videos I recovered from PPPD, my main symptom was rocking, swaying, floating, bobbing, worse when I was still, better in a moving vehicle. Those are mdDS symptoms. So I just labeled it PPPD because I had symptoms of both. And, for ease, I just said PPPD. But I did have symptoms of mdDS as well. And those symptoms are so much better now. So I want to give you ways that you can actually improve these sensations. I also wanted to let people know that the label isn't that important. What's more important is the treatment plan, which is very similar for both PPPD and mdDS. But there are certain aspects of mdDS that can be helped with slightly different techniques to PPPD. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. And one more quick note before we begin. You can 100% recover from these sensations. I know that online, whenever you search mdDS, it's so negative, but just because some doctors don't know how to cure it, doesn't mean you can't get better. That's not my experience, and they're just wrong. That's it. I'm literally proof that these sensations don't last forever, and that there are so many things you can do to help yourself. Okay, so let's talk about what mdDS actually is. So this condition is basically a mismatch between the vestibular and visual systems. The vestibular system is responsible for maintaining our balance and spatial orientation, whereas the visual system gives us sensory information about the external environment. Typically, online it says that mdDS begins from disembarking a cruise ship or a long plane journey or road trip, for example. But that was not the case for me, and it's not the case for many people who get mdDS type symptoms. But there are two different kinds, so motion triggered and non-motion triggered. I'm going to first talk about motion triggered mdDS and what's going on, and then we'll talk about non-motion triggered. So when our body is exposed to motion, our vestibular system senses the movement and sends signals to the brain to maintain our balance. But when we return to land, the vestibular system continues to send out signals of movement, but the visual system isn't detecting any motion. So that's what causes that internal sensation of motion. Now, usually for people who disembark a cruise, they do feel that slightly, but it goes away after 24 hours, But for some people, it can last months or even years afterwards. But as I said earlier, my symptoms of mdDS were not caused from disembarking a cruise. They came on pretty spontaneously, although I had been dealing with PPPD symptoms already for a few months, and then mdDS type symptoms started to come in, like the rocking, swaying when I was still. That was not there in the beginning. It just kind of got worse. So I have no clue if my PPPD kicked off some symptoms of mdDS. Honestly, I have no idea, but that's fine. It doesn't bother me anymore. There's such a huge overlap in terms of PPPD and mdDS symptoms, so it's sometimes hard to differentiate. So typically, mdDS causes internal sensations of movement while you're still, and walking, passive motion will improve it usually. And PPPD is pretty much the opposite. So it's better when you're still, and walking is really difficult. Sometimes you might be triggered in a car. So let's talk briefly about what happens in the brain with non-motion triggered mdDS. Now, I just want to put a disclaimer out here that I'm not a medical researcher, but I've done quite a bit of research of what's already out there, plus my own experiences. So either you're like me and your mdDS rocking, swaying type symptoms came on a few months into your already ongoing vestibular event like PPPD, and so your brain was already receiving slightly messed up signals from your vestibular system, or the rocking and swaying were the first symptoms that you experienced, and this is either because your vestibular and visual systems aren't working together as they should, or your brain is expecting motion when there isn't any. As I said, I'm not a medical researcher. There's not much information about non-motion triggered mdDS. And as I said, for me, I had symptoms of both PPPD and mdDS, so I really didn't know which one I had. And I know that can drive you crazy if you're in the same situation. But I just want you to know that you can recover regardless of the label. but you may have to try a few different things to see what actually helps you. So now we actually know what's going on in the brain when we have mdDS. Now let's get into some practices that you can use to start to reduce the symptoms. The practices I'm going to talk about, I have used myself, and they have really helped lower my sensations. The first few are physical exercises, and the last two are emotional exercises. In the case of both non-motion triggered and motion triggered mdDS, the emotional practices are so important. You need to make sure that your nervous system is not sensing any danger. So we'll go into that in a bit. Okay, so the first practical exercise is progressive muscle relaxation. So this technique basically gets you to tense and then relax different muscle groups in your body. And the idea is that you really focus on and milk that feeling of relaxation after the tension is released. Because I don't know about you, but when the rocking and swaying was really bad for me, I never fully relaxed. I was almost scared to relax because the symptoms would feel so much worse when I was fully relaxed. So you may be the same, but it's really important to let your body fully relax while you have these sensations. Being so tense all the time is just constantly sending a message of danger to your brain, and it's kind of keeping that hypervigilant state going. So with this practice, it's really important to be consistent, daily and often throughout the day, because you really want your brain to learn that it's okay and safe to relax. And then as you do that, I really recommend to focus on your lower body, your legs, because often with these types of symptoms, we are so focused on our upper body and our head because that's where we mainly feel it. So focusing on your lower body will help you be able to find some steadiness. And that was a practice that really helped me gradually reduce the symptoms. So the second physical exercise is eye yoga. Now, this is another really helpful technique that actually surprisingly helped me a lot with the visual symptoms. And I'm going to post a link in the description below for you. This is such a good practice because often when we have these symptoms, we're not really leaving the house much, which means our eyes don't get enough stimulation with depth perception and distances, So eye yoga is a really great practice to get your eyes to work as they should, to stretch them out, to give them, exercises to actually work better. I've actually been doing this exercise recently, and I've noticed quite a big difference with my vision, because even now I still mildly get that feeling of things slightly moving in my vision, but it doesn't happen all the time. If I've done quite a lot of movement in that day, it might be a little bit worse, but especially worse when I look at my laptop a lot because my eyes have just been focused on one area. And when I move them around, sometimes they're really painful to move around. And I know that I've been on my laptop way too long. And obviously that sensation I have is much better now, but this technique has really helped me. So definitely give it a try. The third physical practice is balance training. Now this is kind of an obvious one, but balance training can help the vestibular system to adapt. So this involves exercises like standing on one leg, walking with your eyes closed, or standing on a cushion or a wobble board with your eyes closed. These types of exercises can help build proprioception and reflexive responses, which can help the brain better interpret sensory information from your eyes. You could also even try exercises like swaying back and forth from heel to toe with your eyes closed. That exercise made me feel so weird in the beginning, I will say, because obviously I was taking away the visual aspect and solely relying on the proprioception and vestibular system. Any exercise with your eyes closed is really great for your vestibular system because it's not relying on your vision. It has to just rely on the vestibular system telling your brain where you are in space. The fourth practical exercise is visual tracking. So these types of exercises can help the brain to improve the coordination between the vestibular and visual systems. And they involve things like throwing a ball up and down and looking at that with your eyes. You can even sit still and watch things go past, like on a road, for example. I know that's kind of weird, you don't just want to stand there looking at them, but you can even be in a car and watch other cars go past, really try to track the object that's moving. But you can also do that on a computer screen. And it's important here to keep your head still. You can also do this kind of thing, back and forth with your finger or a playing card, anything like that. Also up and down, diagonally, whatever you want, whatever triggers you. It needs to trigger you a little bit in order for your brain to adapt. So it's no good doing exercises that don't make you very dizzy because your brain is obviously fine with those things. You need it to make you a little dizzy so your brain can adapt. But I will say it's really, really important to utilize the parasympathetic breathing, which I'm going to talk about, but use the deep breathing technique after each exercise, because this will really give your brain the message that these exercises, these movements are safe. And it can take some time to improve with these types of exercises. You may feel slightly triggered in the beginning, but that's normal, as I said. You don't want your symptoms to be triggered more than a 4 out of 10. You want to still be able to function for the rest of the day. So don't do it a crazy amount, just like 20 to 30 seconds at a time. That should be plenty to stimulate your brain. And then do that like 4 times a day. The 5th practical exercise is gaze stabilization, which is very similar to the one we just talked about, but this is where you keep your eyes still and you move your head back and forth. So this one I'm doing right now is one that I did a lot, and that was the one that helped me the most, I'd say, because that exercise really used to trigger me a lot. And I know you may be thinking that, how a visual tracking exercise is going to help me with my rocking sensations because it's not motion triggered. I totally get that, and I had the exact same questions. But as I said before, mdDS is a problem with the vestibular system and the visual system, so we need to train both of these things. Gaze stabilization exercises can really help with that oscillopsia, which is where, objects appear to be kind of moving or bouncing in your vision. I had a very mild version of that, but some of you may have it really intensely. So gaze stabilization is what they recommend for that, and it definitely helped me a lot. Okay, so now we're going to talk about 2 of the best emotional practices that I have used, because both physical and emotional practices are equally as important when you're recovering from chronic dizziness. The nervous system is most likely in this hypervigilant state, which we need to work on lowering in order for your brain to stop hyperfixating on the symptoms. So to do that, you need to incorporate regulation techniques every single day. So exercise number 1 is somatic tracking. This is something I used daily in the beginning of my healing journey, and it really, really helped lower the anxiety of the symptoms, especially with the mdDS type symptoms, because obviously they were really bad when I was laying still. So me just feeling the rocking, feeling as though I was on the ocean, just trying not to panic as much as I could, genuinely helped me a lot. And I know it seems counterintuitive sometimes to focus on the symptoms, because I don't want you to focus on the symptoms all the time, but somatic tracking gets you to focus on the symptoms in a more neutral, calm way, and the Steady Coach has a great video on somatic tracking, which I have linked in the description. That is the one that I used, and it's really helpful. It's basically getting you to focus on the symptoms in a way that's not alarming the brain. We don't want the nervous system to create more chaos by being scared and panicked about the symptoms it's noticing. It's really important that you do some deep breathing with this technique as well. Just look at the symptoms in a calm way. Tell your brain that, okay, I'm focusing on them, but nothing bad is happening here. They're not getting way, way worse. They're okay. I can handle this. That's the kind of vibe that somatic tracking gives you. So last but not least, the last emotional exercise I'm going to talk about today is parasympathetic breathing. And I know I talk about this all the time on my channel, but it's because it's like the best technique I've ever used. This has been the main technique that has lowered my symptoms and anxiety. And the key to this technique is making sure the exhale is longer than the inhale, because as you do this, you are actually stimulating the phrenic nerve. It goes from the diaphragm to your brain, and it tells your brain that you are safe. That's basically the whole message here. So it is having a physical impact on your body. So if you don't notice the symptoms reducing immediately, that doesn't mean it's not working, because that was the way for me a lot. I used to think, this isn't working. It took about 2 months of doing this every single day to finally feel like I had some kind of control over them. But it was still quite a long journey even after that. I'd say this is pretty much the most essential tool to recovering from chronic dizziness. So definitely try to incorporate this into your daily routine. Just take a few minutes each day, 20 breaths in and out, maybe 2 or 3 times across the day. If you notice your symptoms getting more intense during the day, do it then. Do it before you go out to do any activity that would usually trigger you. Do it whenever you notice more anxiety coming on. there's no downside to doing this 100 times a day. So that's all for today. I didn't want to make this a really long video. Of course, there are other techniques that you can use that I do talk about. I mainly use a lot of spiritual techniques as well, which I talk about a lot on my Instagram. So if you are into that kind of thing, then definitely follow me on there. I'll link it in the description. And just one more thing before I leave, you don't have to do every single exercise in this video in order to get better, but I definitely recommend trying all of them to see which ones actually trigger you, which ones help you, You'll know if certain exercises are good for you because they will be triggering your symptoms a little. And that's fine if you can still function afterwards. And with the practical physical exercises, you will need to be consistent with them. You need to do them at least, 3 to 4 times a day for about 6 weeks at least. So definitely give yourself 6 weeks to do these physical exercises. And if you're not seeing any results after that, keep going, because it took me months, Between 6 to 8 weeks, you should start noticing some small changes. I'm not saying that your symptoms will be completely gone in 6 weeks, because mine definitely weren't, but hopefully you'll start seeing some results pretty quickly if you do them consistently and with the regulation techniques as well. And of course, as always, if you feel like you need some one-to-one support, don't hesitate to reach out for a coaching session with me. We can look at your history, look at your individual symptoms, and create a personalized practice for you. It's not always a one-size-fits-all thing in neuroplasticity, so it can be really helpful to get some personal advice. So thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you found it helpful. If you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe, because it helps the video reach other people. Let me know if you have any questions as always, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.